Welcome everyone. I'm glad to have this opportunity to meet with piano teachers from across the country online. Today, we will focus on children's piano music reading and explore some practical strategies from my teaching intervention. Without further ado, let's get started. Many students have studied piano for 4 years. They can play difficult pieces, but when they see a new score, they still struggle. They often stop frequently, check notes one by one, lose the continuity of the music. So today's topic is why can students play, but still cannot read music efficiently? And how can we have students develop better music reading skills? Here are the contents. A common teaching problem. Many teachers have experienced this situation. A student can play a piece very well after practice, but when we give them a new piece, they immediately struggle. Why? Because they learned how to play this piece, but they did not learn how to read new music. Because performance ability does not equal music reading ability. Piano learning includes different abilities. Performance ability includes technique, finger skills, practice, memory. But music reading also requires visual recognition, spatial understanding, prediction, understanding of musical structures. Therefore, a student can be a good performer but still be a weak sight reader. Why do students read slowly? Many students read like this: C, D, E, F, G. They think, what is C? Where is D? Where is E? Every note becomes a separate task. But experienced readers see one meaningful unite. For example, C, D, E, F, G. It's not 5 separate notes. It is a skill pattern. Chunking. An important concept is chunking. Chunk means combining small pieces of information into larger meaningful units. For example, a beginner reads 巧克力真好吃. An experienced reader says 巧克力真好吃. We do not read every character separately because our brain already recognizes the structure. Music works in the same way. In piano music, what are patterns? They can be first, reference points, second, rhythm patterns, third, scale patterns, fourth, interval patterns, fifth, chord patterns. These patterns help students organize musical information. For this reason, I designed 6 lessons to develop the sight reading and help students to develop the way of reading the new score. First lesson, staff and keyboard mapping. In our first lesson, we solved a very basic problem that many students miss for a long time: the space relationship between the staff and the piano keyboard. Many students, when they learn the staff, only remember this line means this note, but they never really connect moving up and down on the staff. With moving left and right on the keyboard, So in this first lesson, I don't ask students to memorize more note names right away. Instead, I help them build a map. Here's how we do it. We use the note C to develop the keyboard into different ranges. We have contrabass register, bass register, middle register, treble register, and super treble register. Then we put the G in each of these ranges. This helps students see how the staff and the keyboard match up. At the same time, I train students to watch the direction of the melody. For example, when the notes go up on the staff, the key moves to the right on the keyboard. When the notes go down on the staff, the keys move to the left. Through this bass training, students start to understand this stuff is not just a bunch of abstract symbols. It is a map that connects with UC to the keyboard. But knowing the map is not enough. Students may have seen the map, but they don't yet own it. So the second training is draw the map from memory, not by looking at it. Close the score, close your eyes. Visualize the score in your mind, then write it out from memory. Why does this work? There is a very important idea in psychology called ritual practice. In simple words, when you read an answer again and again, your brain just thinks, oh, I've seen this before. But when you try to recall the answer by yourself, your brain has to actively search for that information. That searching process actually makes your memory much stronger. Lesson 2, Rhythm. Rhythm pattern recognition. In this lesson, we focus on rhythm patterns. From my teaching, I find that many students read music slowly, not because they don't know rhythm, but because they count the duration of every single note at the read. For example, when they see a series of eighth notes, they may count them one by one, but for skilled readers, these rhythms are usually read as one whole unit. So the goal of the lesson is not to teach more rhythm theory. Instead, it is to help students see that common rhythm patterns can be processed as a single unit. In class, I use 3 activities: clapping rhythms, listening and identifying rhythms, repetition practice. This helps students build a strong sense of rhythm patterns. When I teach rhythm patterns, I also use fruit names as a helper to recognize rhythms. First, quarter note. Pair. Read aloud, pair, while clapping the beat. Then read each one 4 times. Pair, 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 pair. Next one, apple, 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 apple with the same tempo. Watermelon, 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 watermelon. Pineapple, 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 pineapple. Hamburger, 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 hamburger. Orange, 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 orange. Peach, 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 peach. Kiwi, 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 kiwi. This makes the practice more effective. When students no longer need to count every single note, they can put more attention on pitch and musical structure. Next one, Lesson 3, Tonality Patterns. In this lesson, we move into key and skill patterns. In my teaching, I find that many students, when they see sharps or flats, treat them as extra information. For example, when they see a sharp sign, they think this note needs to be raised. But they don't really realize that the key signature actually provides the whole musical environment. So in this lesson, I introduce the circle of fifths. This helps students understand that key signatures do not appear randomly. There's a pattern between different keys. At the same time, we train students to recognize scale patterns. For example, C, D, E, F, G. Students should not see these as 5 separate notes. Instead, they should see this as an ascending scale fragment. Then, students need to memorize the order of sharps and flats. The order of sharp is F, C, G, D, A, E, B. When it comes to this one, I will teach the students to memorize the name of solfege. Solfege is fa, do, sol, re, la, mi, si. And the order of flat is si, mi, la, re, sol, do, fa. Students need to memorize the order. Then add solfege markings on the score. Let's look at this score. When you meet a new piece of music, first count the number of sharps or flats in the key signature. In this score, we can say there is only one flat. So you can mark one flat. Then you can mark the solfege name X. X means xi, the short name of xi. So we use X. When it comes to fa, we can use F. Do, we can use D. So we can use S, like this. Then we can analyze this score is F major. This will make everything much clearer. Okay, lesson 4, interval. In traditional sight reading teaching, students are often asked to memorize what is this note, what is the next note. For example, when they see C to E, many students' first reaction is, where is C, where is C? But for fast reading, this way of processing is not efficient. Because when reading unfamiliar music, students don't have enough time to check every single note one by one. So in this lesson, I want students to build a new way of reading. Don't just focus on individual notes. Instead, focus on the distance relationship between notes. At the start of the class, I first explain to students an interval is the distance between two notes. On the staff, this distance has a very clear visual pattern. By observing, we can see for a second the two notes are diagonal, one on a line, the next on a space. For a third, the two notes are on the same kind of line or space, both on lines or both on spaces. They appear aligned. For a fourth, there is a half a note space between them. For a fifth, there is one whole note space between them. For sixth, there is 1.5 note spaces between them. For seventh, there are 2 note spaces between them. For an octave, there are 2.5 note spaces between them. Among these, thirds, fifths, and sevenths are on the same line or same space. Both notes are on lines or both on space. Fourths, sixths, and octaves are on one line and one space. One note on a line, the other on a space. This visual recognition helps students read intervals quickly without counting every note. Then we practice quickly identifying notes based on the visual patterns of different intervals. We divided this into 3 practice sessions. First, intervals from 2nd to 4th. Second, intervals from 5th to 6th. Third, intervals from 7th to octave. Lesson 5, chord patterns. An interval is the relationship between 2 notes. When 3 notes are stacked in thirds, they form a chord. Here we discuss triads. A triad has 3 forms: root position, first inversion, second inversion. The fingering is also fixed. Root position, right hand 1, 3, 5. Look at the score. We can see the fingering. Okay, next one, left hand 1, 2, 1, 3, 5. First inversion, right hand 1, 2, 5. Left hand 1, 3, 5. Second inversion, right hand 1, 3, 5. Right hand, left hand 1, 2, 1 to 5. In first inversion, there is an interval of a 6, so it is also called a 6 chord. In second inversion, there is a 4th and a 6th, so it is called a 4-6 chord. And this one is used all the tonality, every tonality. Then we use these labels for block chord. BL for root position block chord, BL6 for first inversion block chord, BL4-6 for second inversion block chord, and for broken chords we use BR for root position broken chord, BR6 for first inversion broken chord, BR4-6 for second inversion broken chord. Then, for the in-class exercise, students need to label the chords and play them. The first chord, we use the block chord. We can see the score. And the next one is broken chord. Okay, let's go to the lesson 6. Lesson 6 does not introduce any new teaching content. The main goal of this lesson is to review and apply the 5 patterns learned in the previous 5 lessons. In the early lessons, students learned different types of musical patterns, including first, key and key signature identification. This helps students understand the musical environment of a piece. Second, rhythm pattern recognition. This helps students stop counting every single rhythm and instead see complete rhythmic units. Third, scale pattern recognition. This helps students find stepwise motion within a melody. Fourth, interval recognition. This helps students focus on the distance between notes rather than just looking at single notes. Fifth, harmony and chord pattern recognition. This helps students see the structural relationship between multiple notes. Therefore, in Lesson 6, we want students to combine all these strategies and apply them to real, unfamiliar sight reading tasks. In class, I choose 2 new musical experts. Students are asked not to play right away, but to observe and analyze first. They need to answer several questions. What key is this piece in? Are there any obvious rhythm patterns? Are there any scale fragments in the melody? Are there any repeated intervals? Are there any chords or broken chord structures? Through this process, students gradually develop a new reading habit. Instead of looking at the score and immediately searching for each note, they first observe the overall structure and then play. This is also the final goal of the whole teaching project. I hope students can shift from seeing a note, then finding its key on the piano, to seeing musical structure, then predicting what comes next. So lesson 6 is actually a combined application of the strategies from the first 5 lessons, and it also prepares students for the sight reading test this follows. For the teaching practice part, I select 4 students as research subjects. To protect their privacy, I will not use their real names in the paper or presentation. Instead, I will call them Student A, Student B, Student C, and Student D. These 4 students are around 11 to 12 years old, and they have already reached a certain level of piano playing ability. Among them, Student A and Student B are at ABRNCM grade 7 level. Student C is at grade 6 level. Student D is at grade 5 level. The reason I choose this student is they already have good piano performance skills, but their sight reading ability does not match their performance level. In my daily teaching, I found that they can play relatively advanced pieces through repeated practice. However, when faced with a completely unfamiliar score, they still have problems. For example, they stop to check every single note. They need extra time to find the keys on the piano. They cannot quickly spot repeated structures in the score. They find it hard to keep playing without stopping. This shows that the student's problem is not just a technical issue. Rather, they lack effective reading strategies when dealing with new musical information. Therefore, I hope that through these 6 pattern-based sight reading lessons, students can build a new way of reading. My goal is not to replace traditional note reading teaching, but to add a more efficient reading strategy on top of what they already know. In other words, students still need to know the notes, but at the same time, they also need to learn how to see the relationships between notes and the structure behind the music. Assignment design. To measure the students' progress before and after teaching, I choose Deep Piano as the assignment tool for this study. Deep Piano is a Chinese intelligent piano evaluation software. It can automatically analyze students' actual playing performance. The main reason I choose this software is in traditional piano teaching, evaluation often depends on the teacher's personal judgment. Although a teacher's experience is very important, different teachers may have subjective differences. Therefore, in this study, I wanted to add a more consistent and objective way of evaluation. If you want, you can download at the Apple Store or Google Play this software. It names Deep Piano. It really helps my research. Okay, Deep Piano scores students' performance in 5 dimensions. First, pitch accuracy. This shows whether the student can correctly identify and play the notes in the score. Second, rhythm accuracy. You can see a rhythm accuracy. This evaluates whether the student can keep the correct rhythm at beat. Third, technique. Techniques, this includes basic control skills during playing. Fourth, expression. For example, dynamic change F, O, P, and the musical expression. Fifth, completeness. This measures whether the student can play continuously and finish the whole music excerpt. Through these 5 dimensions, I can not only see the student's final over score, but also observe in which areas they have changed. At the same time, this data will be analyzed together with classroom observations, student work, and teaching reflections, because this study is not just about score changes. It is also about the changes in how students read music. In other words, I want to find out, after the pattern-based sight reading training, do students start to use new reading strategies? For example, do they start to actively look for rhythm patterns? Can they recognize scale and interval relationships? Can they see multiply notes as a single unit? So deep piano is not just a scoring tool here, it is also a helpful tool that helps me observe the development of students' music reading skills. Okay, next one, let's look the ending of the pre-test vs post-test results. After completing the 6 pattern-based sight reading lessons, I gave the 4 students a post-test to see whether their sight reading performance had changed after the teaching intervention. To keep the test consistent, the post-test still used deep piano for evaluation and selected ABRSM Grade 2 sight reading material. Before the test, students had 90 seconds of preparation time. They needed to use the methods learned in this lesson, such as analyzing the key signature, observing the rhythm, looking for scale, interval, and chord patterns. From the results, we can see that all 4 students improved significantly in the post-test. We can see student A improved from 47.9 to 65.2. Student B improved from 21.8 to 47.6. Student C improved from 47.6 to 63.6. Student D from 3.3 to 4.8.3. These results show that after 6 pattern-based sight reading lessons, the students made progress in reading unfamiliar music. However, I think the more important thing is not the scores themselves, but the change in how students read. In the pre-test, students relied more on one note by note recognition, but in the post-test, they began to actively observe the key signature rhythm patterns, the direction of the melody, the relationships between notes. In other words, they started from note-by-note reading towards pattern-based reading. Of course, this course meaning focused on helping students read unfamiliar music more efficiently, so the emphasis was on developing reading strategies, not on musical expression training. In the future, when students build more stable reading skills, we can add further training on dynamics, phrasing, and musical expression. Overall, this teaching practice shows that pattern-based sight reading does not replace traditional note reading teaching. Instead, it helps students see the structure behind the music on top of their basic note reading foundation. The implications. Through this teaching practice, I believe pattern-based sight reading offers several important implications for piano teaching. First, piano teachers need to rethink what music reading really means. In traditional teaching, we often focus on whether students can quickly find each note. However, truly effective music reading is not just about recognizing notes. Students also need to understand the relationships between notes, music structure, repeating patterns, so teachers should not only ask what is this note, but also guide students to think what structure do these notes from. Second, sight reading training should become a regular part of piano learning, not something done only before exams or sight reading tests. Many students' problem is not they cannot play, but they lack thematic reading training. If students are introduced to these things from the beginning, alter points, rhythm patterns, skill pattern, interval relationships, chord structures, they will gradually build a more efficient way of reading. Third, pattern-based sight reading does not replace traditional note reading methods. Students still need to learn note names, rhythm, and basic music theory. But on top of this basic knowledge, teachers also need to help students build a higher level understanding of music. Because music is not made up of isolated notes, it is the relationships between notes that form the real musical structure. Finally, I believe the goal of piano teaching is not just to help students finish a piece. More opportunity, it is to develop students' ability to learn music independently. When students can see patterns in music, they no longer depend completely on the teacher. They can learn new pieces faster, face unfamiliar scores with more confidence, and gradually become more active music learners. Therefore, the core value of pattern-based sight reading is not to make students play faster, but to help them change the way they understand music. Thank you very much. Do you have any question?
Yes, teacher, I have questions. Does pattern-based reading replace traditional note reading?
I think no. Pattern-based reading does not replace traditional note reading. Students still need to develop basic note recognition skills. However, note recognition alone is not enough for fluent music reading. Pattern-based reading provides an additional strategy. It helps students understand relationships between notes and process musical information more efficiently. In my teaching approach, students first build basic notation knowledge and then learn how to organize notes into meaningful patterns.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
Oh, I have a question. Why did you choose students with grade 5 to 7 performance levels, but use grade 2 to 3 sight reading materials?
Good question. Because performance level and set reading level are not always the same. My participants were able to perform grade 5 to 7 repertoire after practice, but their sight reading ability was weaker. If I use grade 5 to 7 sight reading materials, the results could be affected by technical difficulties, such as wider hand movements or more complex rhythms. Using grade 2 to 3 materials allowed me to focus more specifically on students' reading strategies rather than their technical ability.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any question?
I have another question. How can teachers apply this method with the beginner students?
Yes. I believe this approach can also be used with beginners. However, the complexity of patterns should match the student's level. For beginners, teachers can start with simple pattern, such as reference points, to make the students to memorize the C and G as a alter points, and then we can teach them the repeated rhythms with English name or Chinese name, apple, or other 鸡蛋, that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any question?
How long does it take for students to develop pattern recognition skills?
Pattern recognition is not a skill that can be developed completely within 6 lessons. The 6 lessons in this study only introduce students to different types of musical patterns and provided structured practice. Long-term development requires continuous exposure to different musical examples. The purpose of this project was not to create expert sight readers in a short period, but to explore whether structured pattern-based strategies could change students' reading approaches.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other question? If no question, we will end. We'll finish the meeting. Okay. Bye. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Okay.